Hello, welcome to Impersonal Opinion, the podcast where we don't take our opinions personally. Today we're going to be talking about which causes more harm, science or religion. And this is something that came up earlier, and George and Trick were talking about it. And I'm not exactly sure how to go about this, so maybe I can turn it over to George and he can explain.
Okay, yeah, we can all agree that both science and religion have caused harm. I mean, like the religious wars that have been fought, the the scientific development of these weapons of mass destruction that led to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So, like, now, and we both, I think, can agree that uh, both science and religion have caused good, and I think, we might actually even be able to agree that science has caused far more good than religion, but yeah, I think I would contend that based on our evidence of the development of this modern age, while science is much more powerful in creating good for the world, I think it's also much more powerful than religion in actually having harmed the world, and especially now, especially like, for example, with climate change, creating great harm for the world, much more so than religion has ever done or could potentially ever do.
Well, I got a challenge for you, George. And this is going to challenge the whole premise of this podcast. If a terrorist uses a hydrogen bomb to kill a bunch of people in the name of religion, who do you blame? Science or religion?
Well, naturally, you blame both, but without the science, if you just had the religion, that terrorist couldn't do much harm. So that's why I'm saying, like, the science, has far more potential to do far more harm.
Well, let's I guess put this in other terms. Imagine a world where science didn't exist. That we never had science. We'd basically be stuck in I think pretty much the Stone Age or something like that, or an age where we really don't have much comfort or convenience or any of the positive things that humanity currently has today. I think it would just be a life struggle without science. So I don't know if you could
Well, Trick, I
say
agree
that.
with you. I agree with you. I mean, science has created, far, far more good than religion has. But
Well,
but, but
I'm
we're
saying I'm saying that like even the bombs and things like that were created via science. I'm not even talking about religion here. Right now, I'm just talking about science. I'm saying if we didn't have science at all and none of those negative things that occurred due to the negatives of science, basically, I'd say our state right now would be way worse than it is. It would be it would be horrific, basically.
Trick, I'm
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 saying
agreeing with you.
science.
I'm agreeing with you. Science has created so much good, so much more good than religion. But again, we're kind of like addressing the opposite thing. We're like, how much harm, has it created? And in other words, we're not trying to arrive at a kind of like an equation, like in terms of like whether overall science has been more beneficial or less, but rather simply just comparing science to religion, not within the context of benefit, which I guess, we can easily agree that science is far more beneficial, but within the context of harm, which has created more harm and which can potentially create more harm.
I don't think you can separate the two. Like I think if we said, oh, what if there was no such thing as religion in the world? I don't think that would have the dire consequences that we would have if we said, what if there was no such thing as science in the world?
I agree
Um,
with you.
okay,
But
but
ag- but all
I'm
right, in the
saying that,
world
that
today,
that's
for
that's
example,
important to our equation. That's
no, for example, in the world today, okay, you've got all these religions. Now, let's say there was no science at all, and you have all these religious groups. Yeah, there's not much harm they can do to each other, like not even having developed, guns or anything like that. Sure, the science even like requires is required for developing like spears, or at least, like metal-based weapons. So my point is like, you know, what makes religion so harmful today is the science, is that they can have, like, access to
Yeah.
biochemical,
Right.
means and all. And whereas, like, now without religion, okay, let's say there's no religion at all, then you still
Right.
have science that is like threatening human civilization. I mean, our whole species could theoretically go extinct because of climate change. I mean, this is major.
Right. Yeah, and not to mention that religion itself isn't like the whole problem. Like for example, there's political movements. There's all these different things that can cause somebody to use a nuclear bomb, for example. So it's not just. I don't think we. I think it's just bad thinking to begin with that is the problem. But I think
Well, yeah, no,
when you
actually,
don't have
if you wanted to add a third thing, basically what's far more harmful than religion is capitalism. This, because all these
right.
wars, the pretense is that they're religion, but no, the underlying reasons are socioeconomic.
Yeah. So well, I'm sure they're going to get a lot of capitalists or that are going to disagree with that. But yeah, I agree with you on that because
Of
I'm
course they
pretty much a
will.
socialist. But yeah, I mean, you have all these I guess bad thinking, and that is I think more of a problem than the science because that they're able to use the science to their advantage, whereas the science itself is kind of benign until it's being used by somebody that has this type of thinking.
Well,
So
that's a good distinction because science by itself doesn't really have any kind of prescriptions on what you should do. It just tells you what is. Whereas religions do tell you what you should do. It might say for you, you got to kill the homosexual. It might say, you got to kill these kinds of people or those kinds of people. And so that's a huge distinction between science and religion. Religion prescribes things, science doesn't really do that at all.
Right, but if we could apply what Trick was just saying to both, it's bad thinking that leads to like these religious, prescriptions that, only certain people can go to heaven, all and equally as, bad decisions or bad thinking leads to harmful applications of science.
I agree with George on that. For example, in the abuse of animals in science throughout history is pretty bad. So, uh, you know, pe- but again, this all falls into bad thinking, though it's not necessarily religious thinking, though it could be religious thinking. Someone can think uh, uh, God made animals for their use or something like that. But yeah,
All right, so I agree with you, Trick. So I think, all right, fundamental to both the harm that religion and science causes is bad thinking. So like, I think let's maybe segue to this kind of like exploration of what do we mean? What actually is bad thinking?
Whew. Christianity, Islam, Judaism.
No, 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 no. I'm not saying examples of bad thinking, but because I mean, we could say, hey, we could say, modern science,
I can,
great.
but
Again,
I can
climate
give
change.
you another example of bad thinking: Santa Claus.
In other words, I think like by bad thinking, I think we're specifically targeting the misuse of both science and religion based on things like, the human characteristics, human failings like greed, selfishness, um, power hunger, these very negative character traits that then compel us to behave in these harmful ways, both within religion and science.
yeah.
Yeah.
Except science doesn't really have like a book that tells people other people are evil because they're not following your religion or something like that. Whereas religion obviously does. So that's the difference there. Science is just all science is a methodology. It's like saying mathematics is dangerous because we've created formulas that create something that's bad or something. I don't
Yeah,
know,
but then then
but
then what do you think is more dangerous? A system that's like non-moral, or I don't know if amoral is the right term, like science,
amoral, yeah, yeah.
right? Or a system that like at least attempts morality.
Oh
Are you saying
no
what's
no no.
worse?
Well,
Yeah,
yeah, because I think science, science to the extent, I mean, I personally believe, like, for example, science has certain standards of ethics. And in psychology experiments, you can't just conduct these Milgram-like experiments, they have these standards and all. But I think, yes, I think more fundamentally, science does not,
Well,
deal with
ha-
ethics. And that's scary.
who has ever killed someone in the name of science versus who has ever killed someone in the name of religion?
What are you
I
kidding?
mean,
In the
I
name of
can't cite a single
science?
example of someone who's killed in the name of science.
Oh, what are you kidding? I mean, like the people, people have been, I think, killed in order to like get their organs to study them. Animals, my God, like Trick was referring to this before. It's so horrible that just the experiments we conduct on animals, not even for a practical benefit, but simply to understand their workings in the name of science. The suffering, the torture that these animals have gone through. No anesthesia, my God, it's horrific.
That's
yeah, I
a
agree
good
with George on
example
that
of
part.
bad thinking.
Okay.
But yeah, no. If we're gonna compare well, I don't know. Yeah, they're pretty comparable. I don't know,
Yeah, well,
but
yeah, like I want to continue with, as far as the animal suffering, the animal killing, when you look at it, there have been plenty of these animals killed in the name of both science and religion. Because, and that comes from, I think, a root of bad thinking,
Yeah.
and any,
And technically, more animals have been killed in the name of hunger than anything else.
well, yeah, it's hunger that causes more harm than science or religion.
yeah. But
I
in
don't know if
regards to what
hunger's a
people do,
religion, though.
yeah. Anyway, this is why I think w- philosophy is important. It's as important as science because, like I said, I don't think science really says anything about our ethics. Um, like I said, it plays a part of our ethics. Like we can understand certain consequential things via scientific understandings, but the base structure of ethics has to proceed before we have we do anything scientific. So we have to understand why it's bad to harm animals for certain things and
And
things like
Trick,
that.
you're right. This is the huge existential challenge that our world faces now. In other words, like science advanced, you know, far more quickly and far more comprehensively than did our morality. For example, like we
Yeah.
we understood in the 70s this threat of climate change, but our morality is so unevolved that we didn't care. So like in these following decades, I think you're right. I think like since science is more and more powerful in so many ways. I mean, you have
Yeah.
these biochemical agents that could like create pandemics and stuff. It's really scary what could potentially happen. So that our world has to I think have to basically transition our focus, our resources, our understanding to developing, the human beings who populate the world now and future generations to be far more ethical, so that
Yeah.
they can responsibly address what science, has created and is capable of creating.
Yeah, I think a good way to put it is our wisdom never isn't keeping up with our technology. So we have these technological advances where in the future we could have cars that fly that run on nuclear power that can be flown into a building. You know what I'm saying? But we don't have the wisdom to do the right thing necessarily. So that's a
Yeah,
problem.
yeah, I agree. I mean, so basically the problem is that science and you could even say religion are maybe our tools in a way, but humans are too stupid to know what to do with them.
Right,
Well, I
and I
think
think, go ahead, Trick.
go ahead. I think
Well,
religion is problematic for the most part. Like, well, except for certain religions, most of the religions that we have today are negative. They have too many problems inherent in the religion themselves that cause these that allow people not to be logical. Basically, they allow people not to come to a rational conclusion of what ethics means, and rather just say, "Oh, it's God's will or something like that." So it's that problem there, but yet we still have the technology that allows these people to be crazy with the technology if they wanted to.
Yeah, I was
Go
going to
ahead.
say the same thing, the exact same thing. That, like, basically religion is preventing us from evolving a more pragmatic, more useful, and more effective morality. Like
Right.
this logic, this religious logic, for example, that some people are so evil that they deserve to suffer eternally. I mean, I can't think of a more hateful belief.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, oh God.
Yeah, I can't either. It seems to me that increasing the ethics of people, having an ethical standard that improves the behavior of people and leads to overall happiness, is our main priority. And it seems like that's something that it precedes science or religion. Like that's most important because an ethical person would only use science for good. It would seem.
Right.
Uh, Yeah, yeah, I think, so more fundamental than the science and religion is, this system of ethics, our conscience, and well, interestingly, I mean, the way science is connected to this is when you think of so much of the harm we do to others, to the world, we do it in as immoral attempts to seek pleasure and happiness. I think, for example, like very happy people would be far less likely to injure and torture and harm and threaten other individuals and animals than a more happy person. A more happy person, they're content. They don't need to kind of like rely on hurting others to derive their happiness. So, I think one of the components of establishing a strong morality is to implement various, new avenues. For example, like teaching happiness in schools, maybe a happiness pill or something, to get people so happy that they no longer have to rely on these harmful methods of deriving their happiness that cause so much harm to others.
Yeah.
Well,
Though
there's a
I think.
lot of
Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
go ahead, Mike.
I was gonna say there's a lot of sociological data to show that once the standard of living in a country goes up and government corruption goes down, overall happiness certainly goes up, and also religiosity and all of these archaic ways of thinking go down as well.
Absolutely.
Hmm. Yeah, we do have some problems to contend with. For example, people abuse other creatures for the sake of humans, for example. So it's a kind of a speciesist idea where they're saying, well, we don't really want to harm the animals, but we have to do it for the sake of humans. So I think things get rationalized as well, which is kind of a problem because it's hard to say, well, should we be doing this or should we not be doing this?
Well,
But
that's actually another way, for example, that science informs the problem. Like most people don't realize that the livestock industry contributes to at least about 20% of greenhouse gases that cause climate change. So
right.
right there, you have this profoundly influential reason to consume far fewer animals. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
everybody
and
listen.
even in the oh, go ahead,
Yeah,
Chandler.
yeah. Everybody listening to this, watch Cowspiracy. Just got to mention that.
Was
Oh
I the
yeah,
one that told you about that movie?
Yeah, I
Or
think you did, and I watched that.
yeah, it's a really good documentary.
Guys,
yeah,
I got a
and even
question. Go ahead, Trick.
even when it comes to animal experimentation, I think we're building technologies nowadays that most of that experimentation is unnecessary. And I think that's just going to improve as time goes on. That's all I wanted to say. Go ahead, George.
No, absolutely. All right, so
I was
like
just
I think can we and this I'm speculating some. I would imagine that there are like areas of our brain that deal with logic, that to the extent they're working well, we become more logical, rational, whatever, and to the extent they're not, we become less so, and that we can somehow through various means enhance our logical, rational abilities. Now my question is, do you guys know of any correlate kind of brain regions and all that that relate to conscience, or is conscience so vastly different in that it's a completely social construct?
It's not. It's definitely not completely social because we know that certain psychopaths or sociopaths have a condition where certain parts of their brain are being blocked, basically. So and they can get a microchip, basically, or this is something that's being worked on that bypasses that part that's causing the problematic part, basically. That it kind of fixes that so they can empathize it again. Um, so, but I don't think we really have, as of yet, the whole workings of what the neural structure is that causes empathy and things like that. I mean, takes the whole brain, but they do know that certain sociopaths and psychopaths that can't empathize actually have a brain condition, basically actually have a part of the brain that isn't functioning properly. So
Right, because here, I mean, like with climate change, about 60% of Americans deny that it's happening, deny that we're causing it and stuff. And anybody, basically they just don't care enough to look at the evidence objectively enough to reach the right conclusions. I think, that's one would, so it's kind of like a problem
yeah,
of conscience. It's not like they don't
yeah,
understand, they don't care to understand.
it's
And
sociological too. Like if you look at people in other cultures where they're basically, they kill they'll skin an animal while it's alive, but they were raised since day one to do this, and they don't think anything of it because of that. Their mind doesn't process, doesn't make the connection of the animal being skinned alive while, so basically they've created this block because that's how they were conditioned since a child. So I think it's a conditioning thing as well, that we have to, for empathy, it's learned as well. People teach others why they have to empathize and things like that. And if it's not learned, if people just are so accustomed to it day in and day out, to skinning an animal alive, then it becomes something in their brain that is just a daily occurrence, and they don't think anything of it. So it's the same thing with uh, climate change and things like that. People just are accustomed to not thinking about these topics. They don't care, because they're not shown the results of it, I guess, every day or anything like that. It's just something that they can avoid and block out.
right, well, that invites the question, like for example, with the cultures that skin animals alive. Is that an example of a more biological genetic um, conscience process that's being muted or distorted or destroyed by cultural conditioning? Um,
I doubt it. I think if you took one of those people, you adopted one, for example, from that culture and brought it into the U.S., they would have the same thing that a normal kid has. Basically, they don't want to see their dog get eaten, but
no, but
eh,
that's what I'm saying, Trick.
the
I'm saying
pig,
like
the pig will. Okay.
no, Trick. My question is more directly is like if those people had not been conditioned to or maybe you were answering it. I'm not sure. If those people had not been conditioned to be so callous toward those animals, is our fundamental, at birth, without any conditioning, state to kind of like to express and experience a natural empathy that would would naturally not want to do those things, so that we have to be culturally either numbed from that or just changed in a way that we therefore then do that harm.
Well,
I think
empathy. Oh, fine. Go ahead.
sorry, I was just going to say that I've heard of experiments done where they've found that very young children are actually kind of empathetic. So I think empathy is almost like the default position,
Yeah.
like a bunch of guys watching another guy, crush his nuts when he falls off with a bike or something like that. Everyone kind of feels it.
So that's good news. That's good to know, because that means, like, with what that says is, like, for example, we have antidepressants that help depressed people reach kind of like a non-depressed state and all, and they're very effective. They're incredibly effective. So imagine, like, if we could locate these empathy centers of the brain and all, and somehow, like, activate them, even in like hyperactivate them, whatever, to create a species that's far more empathetic than we experience today. Like
But
goodness pills.
but saying that, I've also seen like little kids pull tails on cats and stuff like that. So I wonder. I think obviously there needs to be a few more studies done. I think.
Right, because I think in those cases, like, some very young kids simply don't have the understanding that they're causing harm to another animal. So that's based kind of like their mind isn't developed enough to have reached that level of working empathy. But so you're right. There has to be kind of like a development of that aspect too.
Yeah, well, guys, this is very interesting because, when I was a young kid, I did some really awful things. Like I chopped up this worm into like four pieces, and now I
It
look
probably didn't
back.
feel a thing.
What?
It probably didn't feel a thing.
I would hope so because later on when I thought about it, I'm like, man, I feel so bad about that. Like, man, why? Like, I wouldn't like it if someone chopped me up into four pieces. Like, and I empathize with that worm, and I feel it's kind of weird. But I think what happens is that yeah, when you are a child, you do things often and you're not really thinking about everything you're doing. And then that's why everybody has regrets of stuff that they did when they were a young kid or when they were a teenager. And then 20 years down the road, they think, what was wrong with me?
Absolutely. So again, like, and I guess so we're kind of like concluding that, like, beneath the harm that religion and science causes is this imperfect human morality. And I'm wondering if we can kind of like get even deeper into that. What, is it about happiness? Is it we're just not happy enough? What is, like, more fundamental to our development of a stronger conscience?
Yeah, well, again, if you have the empathy, for example, I think people might have cognitive dissonance over their religions, for example, because some of the things in religion, and that's why when you actually read passages in, say, the Bible or the Quran to people that are those specific religions, they do have often cognitive dissonance because their their actual moral understandings conflict with the things that they're reading there. So that's why they kind of, a lot of times they'll try to work around it. They'll try to make workarounds like, oh, it's not literal, or they'll try to work around the things in the Bible because they already have um, this ethical or moral understanding to begin with that doesn't really work with their religion.
Rick, I think you're right. I think, like, religion today may be the world's chief subverter of a higher morality. Because, look, people say, well, slavery is in the Bible, so slavery is okay. Eating animals is okay. I'm like, yeah, anything that's in the Bible is okay, and, like, so that creates huge problems.
It's also one of the
Right.
greatest inhibitors of science, because I mean, look at the creationists. I mean, look at a lot of the climate change deniers. A lot of them were also religious fundamentalists. They think that mankind can't possibly change the climate because God is in control of all things. And for
Right.
creationists, they're trying to hold back scientific research on a lot. Anything that conflicts with the Bible, pretty much is no for them. And so it undermines and slows the progress of science.
Absolutely. And I wouldn't, like, I wouldn't completely disparage religion, for example, in the same way I wouldn't completely disparage philosophy, because like just like for example, I think the most advanced philosophy, as we were talking about in the last podcast, is the analytical philosophy, the philosophy that's not just based on what we want to be or think should be and all, but what makes sense. So like religion doesn't necessarily have to be harmful, but it certainly has to move away from this revelation prophecy based methodology for establishing their understanding to more of kind of like an ethical religion or a rational religion. Religion, I think, in a very broad sense, was our first attempt to understand, who we are, what is this reality,
Yeah.
and so
E-
like,
Even
go ahead.
even an irrational religion doesn't necessarily have to be harmful. I mean, just for example, look at Jainism. Jainism is the least harmful religion I've ever seen, and I think it's probably less harmful than people that aren't religious. So, I mean, they don't even kill insects, right?
That's a
So
good point.
Yeah, Jainism is my favorite of the world religions just because
yeah,
the
so
principle of nonviolence is just the main focus of it.
yeah, the main problem is even with Jainism and religions like that is there's still a lot of concepts in them that are very irrational, and when you have irrational beliefs, it tends to translate into other problems in the world. For example, going against the science and things like that. So
Absolutely.
Yeah. What's interesting is that, like, take for example, while Jainism will have elements of like reincarnation or reward or punishment, which is still sort of free will belief based, and so therefore it's messed up. The good thing is that you wouldn't have a Jain terrorist who would kill scientists for teaching evolution or something like that.
You guys realize that, like, the atheist movement is good because it's basically challenging all these irrational beliefs and all. But what we're doing, our movement, our mission to move the world beyond this belief in free will is probably the strongest, most powerful means of moving people away from religion. Because like, I've read various kinds of texts that by religious people, by Jews and Christians, that hold free will to be the foundation of their religion. This greatest gift of God and stuff. And
yeah,
naturally, it's also like how they threaten people with hell and all. I mean, without it, they couldn't. So like, so this, we're our work is at the center of this whole atheist movement to kind of like to move people toward a more rational based existence.
yeah. Even though some people can be like a Calvinist, I guess, and still and not believe in free will yet,
No, but
still
they're
believe in
insane. I
religion.
mean, yeah, they're like, yeah, yeah, they don't we don't have
They're
a free will, but
insane.
it's completely just. It's completely just for God to like decide
Yeah,
beforehand that
yeah. I know.
Right. And what's weird about Calvinism, though, is that it it almost requires God to have free will. It's like otherwise it would just be completely an acausal event that causes each person to go to heaven or hell. Because by what system can it be justified without the notion of deserve, which requires free will belief, and it's missed.
God, we should actually do a podcast, a free will podcast that, like, whether we want to kind of personify reality or just see it as a kind of like a naturalistic phenomenon. Does the reality that controls everything, did it ever, can it ever, does it have a free will? And like, so how would that question of free will apply to like whatever is like controlling everything?
Yeah. So to get back on topic, what's worse, religion or science?
I would say religion, hands down.
Yeah, religion.
Yeah,
What?
I think so.
Well, again, like if we want to be objective, not what's worse per se, but what's created more
More harmful.
harm. I,
Or
I would have to say it has to be science because again, without science, religion is pretty much impotent. to create major harm. But science doesn't really need religion at all to create all the harm that it's created through the weapons throughout all the wars and now climate change and all. You
Not
know, I
necessarily, George, because I mean, look, it says in Christianity that, you don't need to wash your hands. Now imagine a principle like that inside a religion. Not washing your hands before you eat can lead to millions and millions of people suffering and dying from disease. Now, all you need is just a psychological meme like that to be believed by millions and millions and millions of people, and that could cause tremendous amount of harm right there. You don't need weapons to cause harm. All you need is just illogical and incorrect ways of thinking.
Well, that's a good point. I think so. Maybe, from that understanding, religion could theoretically be more harmful. For example, like the belief that like anybody who doesn't believe that what you believe is like so evil they deserve to be killed or something, that could like extinct the human race. But so maybe like rather than kind of like addressing the question theoretically or speculatively in terms of what might be possible, if we go back to the history of of our world till now, which has been more harmful, religion or science? I think the evidence says that science has been far more harmful. And
But,
we can even just like um, limit our consideration to climate change and exclude everything else.
but I think that if someone creates a nuclear bomb, they use science to do that. But science doesn't say that we need to create a nuclear bomb. But the religion would say, use it to kill as many people as possible.
Right, but we were talking about that before. In other words, like bad thinking or our faulty uh, basic character, could be easily applied to religion and science. So fundamentally, the problem is like our greed, selfishness, callousness, and all. But that equally applies to both science and religion.
I don't get how it applies to science because there's nothing in science telling someone to behave in that way.
Yeah.
Well, no, and that's the problem. That's part of the problems, David. In other words, like, what religion at least attempts a morality. Religion, you got to realize before there were any like civil governments that could really, impose order, rule of law, and all that stuff. All they had was science. I mean, religion. They tried to scare people into behaving well because that's all they could do. There was no police system, no criminal justice system. So like, but the problem with science, it's amoral. It doesn't consider morality, so that like a scientist will without any moral qualms, dissect a living being without any anesthesia, and not even consider the morality of it.
Yeah, I think we need a third alternative. We need something that's not immoral and not amoral, but very moral, where that seems to be a focus, because I do agree that that can be a weakness of science, even though at the same time it's all right if you have ethical scientists, but if you don't have ethical scientists, then it can be pretty bad. So
Right. And again, I want to clarify, while I believe that science is and has been far more harmful than religion, I also agree that science has been far more helpful than religion. So
I,
it's kind of like,
I was just going to say, it sounds almost like you're making a case that that science is. I'm just not understanding it, to be honest. I think if a scientist does something that's unethical, I don't think we need religion to say, if I kill this person because I want to test his organs or something. I don't think I don't think that's science. We don't need religion to tell us that that's wrong because we know that if we do that to someone else, then someone else may do it to us.
I
right. No,
agree,
absolutely. I
David.
agree with you. I agree with you.
Yeah, makes
Yeah,
sense.
science is religion is absolutely not necessary to morality. I think
Right.
maybe another way of understanding is like science is far more powerful, in so many ways than religion, and its power can be used, equally or hopefully not equally, but it can be used for good and harm. I
So
think
let's
that's an
let
understanding.
let's talk about the future a little. Oh,
I just wanted to ask one. So, what would be scientific about someone using science to do harmful things?
David, say that again.
What? How can I put this? It, what is it in science that would get someone to do something harmful? I mean, why would someone do something harmful based on anything scientific?
Well, for example, oh, no, you're right. Science is a tool. I think most fundamentally, science is a tool, just like religion. Religion is a tool for ascertaining truth as science. But just the way we humans have used religion and science, it seems like as a tool for doing both good and harm, science is so much more powerful than religion.
Yeah, I think I agree there, George, because, yeah, basically science is a tool and it's more powerful for either good or evil than religion alone ever could be.
I think a good way to look at it is if we're going to look at the future from today, the future, what either science can make our future a hell. Basically, it could bring us back to the Stone Age, for example, or science could bring us to some transhumanism type of um, happiness. So science couldn't do both of those things. Religion, it can't really do it either. It's just going to be, I think, negative, a negative thing. But it's not. It definitely couldn't do the worst thing that science can do which is a nuclear war or something like that knocks people down to uh, evolutionary struggle again. So
Yeah, and
George, do you
science.
think that
Go
got
ahead,
a quick
Michael.
question, George. Do you think that the good that has resulted from science in any way negates the bad, or do you think they both equally exist? Does one remove the other at all?
Oh no, the good. I think science has done far more good, hopefully, than it's done bad. I would tend to guess that science actually is indispensable. The quality of life we have now, it's all science. Our
right,
heating, our air conditioning. My God.
Yeah, okay, but
right.
but
So
my
so
point was that let's say science has done 200 million units of good, and it did 100 million units of bad. So when you remove everything, you're still left over with 100 million units of good for science.
Yeah, but
But
but Michael.
let's say religion did 50 million units of good and bad, and that subtracts itself. Overall, science still has a net positive.
Well, but the problem is climate change. While science has done, again, so much more good, hopefully, than bad, it has the potential to very within decades, reverse that entire equation. Just wipe out, theoretically the species. My God.
Okay.
well, that wouldn't be a bad thing, but that's different.
Well, I mean, a lot of religions are obsessed with the end times, and some of them want to bring them about through nuclear bombs. So that
Oh, I
that that
know.
could be a potential challenger to climate change in terms of world destruction.
Yeah,
I'm,
but I
I'm
mean,
still,
go
I
ahead,
was just
David.
going to say, I'm still confused. So, science doesn't tell you to go out and build a nuclear bomb. I mean,
You're right, David. David, we're just basically like religion and science are both tools. They're kind of like neutral in their most um, general objective. It's the way we use them that renders them either harmful or helpful. And science is
but
so much. Go ahead.
I don't get how religion is the same as science because religion tells you what to do.
Right, and actually, that's one way that religion is superior to science, because at least religion makes an attempt at morality, whereas science makes no attempt.
See, I'd rather have no attempt than a bad attempt, because I think most real or the religions, the two main religions that we have today, the largest ones are the ones that I think are the most morally inept. So I think that's the problem with them.
Well, I don't know, because like a lot of times religion is blamed for huge problems that are actually socioeconomic. In other words, like the people who will rally these terrorists to jihad, their underlying reason very often is not about, they could care less about the religion. They just want more land or more resources for themselves.
I think
So much of this is economic.
Mm,
I
it's
think
both.
George
It's
a
both.
better I think George a better debate would be what has done more harm for the world, capitalism or religion.
Well, capitalism, I think, yeah. I think easily
But I
capitalism. And
think then you would at least be comparing apples to apples, because I think comparing science to religion is comparing apples to oranges. They're just
So
two totally different things.
well,
yeah,
yeah, they're different, but
I
like,
was going to ask that. Yeah.
no, they're different, but again, we're just limiting to this, to the what has the
Yeah,
potential to create more harm.
yeah. It's not really anything like there's nothing to really compare. But yeah, we're just going off on the two different things there.
Yeah,
I th- I, th- I
so many good ideas for future episodes that contained in what we've said here.
Well,
I
write
w
them down so we don't forget.
Good thing is it's all recorded.
well, we could talk
That's due
about
to
capitalism
science.
at some point because I've had a little discussion on Facebook recently. You know, people thinking that I'm talking about Marxism or something like that, and when I'm just basically addressing like a realistic or I'm sorry, a idealistic world where people are rational. I think in a world with that we have today where people are not rational, I think we need some kind of capitalism. But that's a different discussion. I know, so we should probably move that to a different
Yeah,
podcast.
but no, trick, the capitalism question is powerfully connected to the free will issue, because, like, for
Right.
example, it's the free will belief that has the rich first of all blame the poor for being poor and justify
Yeah.
not helping them, and then justify their being able to, like, have, for example, 1/10 of 1% of the population, owns more
Yeah.
than 50%. So, like, yeah, the free will belief
Exactly.
is the foundation of so much economic disparity.
I agree. I absolutely agree. So that's another discussion. But
Yeah, I guess it's getting time to where we should end this episode, but this has been great, guys. So, was there anything else anyone needed to say, or?
no, just that science is important. We have to keep science, and since we have to keep science, we need to be rational. We need to have ethics, and um, we don't necessarily need religion anymore. That's all I have to say.
Yep.
Yeah, I think the world can do just fine without religion, especially the like the traditional organized type of religion. But a society without science is essentially going to be either stagnant or regressive.
I think we're agreed there. So, should I end this one then, or?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's all right.
Okay. You've been listening to Impersonal Opinion, the podcast where we don't take our opinions personally, and we've been talking about the good and the bad and the ugly of science and religion and free will belief and capitalism and all that fun stuff. So, I'm sure you're gonna disagree with us on something we said. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.